Have you ever noticed how exhausting it is to live inside your own head when it refuses to be quiet? Not the kind of exhaustion that comes from lifting weights or running marathons, but the kind that creeps in when thoughts loop endlessly, each one pulling you into a different storm. You lie in bed at night, replaying old conversations. You wake up rehearsing tomorrow's battles. Your mind scrolls through possibilities the way your phone scrolls through a feed. No end in sight, no true nourishment in the noise. This is the hidden fatigue of the modern age. Not simply doing too much, but thinking too much about too many things all at once. We live in a time when silence is rare and stillness is suspicious. Every moment feels like an opportunity for input, notifications lighting up, headlines demanding outrage, comparison whispering that you're already behind. The mind becomes a crowded room where everyone speaks at once, and you, the host, are too polite to ask anyone to leave. But here's the truth few will tell you. Intelligence is not about letting every thought take up residence. It's about knowing which ones deserve a key and which ones you let pass quietly at the door. The most intelligent people I've met share a subtle discipline. They guard the gates of their mind as if guarding a sacred city. They refuse to feed thoughts that drain their strength. They understand that mental clutter is not harmless. It is a slow leak in the roof of your inner fortress, a constant drip that erodes clarity, patience, and peace. The Stoics saw this centuries ago. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." He meant that mastery begins not in controlling the world, but in curating the world you allow to live inside your head. That curation is an act of courage, because to choose which thoughts to avoid, you must face the ones you've been carrying for years. Some inherited from family, some planted by culture, some born in moments of fear. You have to decide which of them are truth and which are just noise wearing the mask of wisdom. In this video, we will explore 10 things an intelligent person refuses to entertain in their mind. These are not petty annoyances or fleeting doubts. They are cognitive traps that feel familiar, even comfortable, yet quietly undermine your ability to live with clarity and strength. Each one is a thief, some polite, some seductive, all dangerous if left unchecked. We'll uncover why they're so easy to fall into, how they hijack your energy, and most importantly, how to let them pass without giving them power. This is not about controlling every thought. That's impossible. It's about mastering the art of pause, the unpredictable power of choosing not to engage. When they can't read you, they can't use you. When you stop rehearsing pain, you start rehearsing freedom. And when you begin treating your mind like the most valuable room in the world, you stop letting just anyone walk in. So take a breath. Step back from the noise. Imagine your thoughts as guests, some welcome, some intrusive, some needing to be shown the door. By the end of this journey, you'll know exactly who stays, who goes, and why your peace is worth the price of that decision. Let's begin. There is a certain kind of prison that has no walls, no guards, and no visible sentence. It is built entirely from memory, not the kind that warms you, but the kind that traps you in a courtroom that never adjourns. This is the rumination loop, the endless replay of past events, each scene examined from every angle, as if the right replay could rewrite the ending. It begins innocently. A conversation you wish you had handled differently, a mistake you wish you had avoided, a choice that still makes you wonder if you were foolish or simply unlucky. But soon the scene is on repeat, playing not once or twice, but dozens of times in a single day. You change the words you said, the tone you used, the decision you made. You imagine their reaction if you had been sharper, softer, braver, colder. And while your mind believes it's solving something, what it's really doing is keeping you stuck in the same moment, draining you one thought at a time. Psychologists call it rumination. The Stoics might call it enslavement to the past. Marcus Aurelius warned, Do not let the future disturb you. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present. The same is true of the past. Do not let yesterday rob you of today's clarity. But rumination tricks you. It disguises itself as problem solving. It whispers that if you just think about it one more time, you'll finally find the answer, the closure, the redemption. Yet closure rarely comes from overthinking. It comes from acceptance. I once knew someone who would replay a single argument from years ago as if it had happened yesterday. It wasn't that they couldn't forget. It was that forgetting felt like letting the other person win. But in protecting their sense of justice, they were sacrificing their peace. Every replay was another lap in a race with no finish line. The truth is, your mind is not a courtroom. You don't need to keep calling witnesses to the stand. You don't need to keep proving your innocence to an audience that no longer exists. Intelligent people learn to treat these mental replays like uninvited guests. They notice their arrival, they acknowledge their presence, and then they show them to the door. How? By separating the fact from the story. The fact is what happened, the exact words spoken, the event that occurred. The story is the meaning you've assigned to it, often colored by emotion, fear, or wounded pride. Write the facts in 3 short sentences, no more. You'll be surprised at how much of your mental loop was built not on truth, but on interpretation. This simple act creates a pause, a crack in the cycle where you can choose not to engage. And in that pause, you reclaim something powerful. You're present. Rumination is an energy leak, a mental fog exchange. Every moment spent in the loop is a moment you cannot spend building something new. It is a quiet theft, disguised as care. The more you feed it, the hungrier it gets. The less you give it, the weaker it becomes. And here is the mind reversal that changes everything. Letting go is not losing. It is refusing to let what is already over keep shaping who you are now. You are not betraying your values by moving on. You are protecting them. Because if a memory demands constant replay to feel real, perhaps it is no longer worth keeping alive. Intelligent people know that the past will visit from time to time. They just don't let it move in. They open the door, greet it politely, and let it pass without offering a seat. That's not denial, it's discipline. The discipline to live where life is actually happening. Here, in the only moment you can still change. And every time you choose presence over replay, you are training your mind to be a place worth living in. Because stillness is not the absence of thought. It is the mastery of which thoughts deserve to stay. There's a peculiar habit the human mind carries, a tendency to leap not just into the future, but into the worst possible version of it. One small worry becomes the seed of an entire disaster film, directed, produced, and starring you. A delayed reply means they're angry. A routine meeting becomes the stage for your humiliation. A minor ache signals something terminal. This is catastrophic forecasting, the art of predicting calamity without evidence. It feels like preparation, but in reality, it's a form of self-torture. In the primitive brain, this habit made sense. Anticipating danger kept our ancestors alive. But in a modern world where most dangers arrive as emails, news alerts, or uncertain outcomes, the same instinct hijacks our peace for threats that don't exist outside our imagination. The mind doesn't know the difference between a real event and one vividly imagined. Every catastrophic thought triggers the same physical stress response: tightened muscles, shallow breathing, racing pulse. Your body begins rehearsing for a crisis that may never come, burning resources you could have used to solve the problems that actually exist. The Stoics understood this trap well. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." He wasn't dismissing real hardship. He was pointing to the heavy cost of living in the shadows of what might happen. Catastrophic forecasting isn't about seeing the future clearly. It's about blinding yourself to the present by staring too hard into the dark. I once coached someone who dreaded a quarterly review weeks before it happened. Every day they imagined the conversation, the criticism, the disappointment, the silent judgment. By the time the actual meeting arrived, they were so drained by the rehearsals that they could barely think clearly. The review? It went fine, but their nervous system had already lived through failure a dozen times. Intelligent people learn to recognize the mental dopamine compliance loop hidden in this pattern. The mind gets a strange satisfaction from anticipating disaster. It gives the illusion of control, as if naming the worst could prevent it. But this control is counterfeit. The forecast is almost always wrong. And even if it were right, suffering early doesn't protect you later. It simply doubles the cost. So how do they stop? First, they name the thought for what it is, a forecast, not a fact. They remind themselves this is a prediction, not reality. Then they use a technique I call the time-boxed worry. For 5 minutes, they allow the worst-case scenario to play out in their mind without interruption. They write it down in detail. When the timer ends, the scene is over. The curtain falls. The rest of the day is reclaimed. This small ritual creates a boundary around fear. It prevents anxiety from spreading into every conversation, every plan, every quiet moment. Because catastrophic forecasting thrives in unbroken attention. Starve it of that, and it weakens. Psychologically, this habit is an attention bypass protocol. Your brain skipping over the present to land in an imagined crisis. But the present is where your tools are. The future, when it arrives, will be met with the same mind you're shaping right now. Intelligent people choose to shape it into something calm, deliberate, grounded. They prepare for challenges without living in them prematurely. They acknowledge risk without letting risk occupy the entire landscape of thought. They understand that imagining disaster doesn't make them more resilient. Recovering quickly when life actually throws something hard does. And so, instead of standing at the edge of every possible cliff, staring into the drop, they step back. They plant their feet on solid ground. They keep their gaze on the path they're walking, not the shadows that might lie ahead. Because fear is a poor architect of the future, and the house it builds is never worth living in. One of the quickest ways to lose your peace is to assume you know exactly what's in someone else's mind. A shift in tone becomes proof of hidden resentment. A delayed message becomes evidence of rejection. A glance, a sigh, an unfinished sentence. Your thoughts rush in to fill the silence with a story. This is mind reading, the belief that your interpretations are facts, and when mixed with projection, placing your own feelings onto someone else, it becomes a powerful cognitive trap. The danger lies in how convincing it feels. You aren't imagining you're guessing. You believe you're seeing the truth. If you're feeling insecure, you project that insecurity onto them and interpret their every action through its lens. If you're carrying anger, you detect hostility in neutral words. The mind becomes a mirror, but you mistake the reflection for their reality. Psychologically, this is fueled by the spotlight effect and confirmation bias. Once you decide what someone is thinking, you start noticing only the details that support your belief. You ignore the 100 other possibilities because the one you've chosen feels safe, even if it's painful. The Stoics warned against this. Epictetus said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we may listen more and speak less." Listening in this sense isn't just about hearing their words. It's about resisting the urge to overlay your own script before they've even finished their sentence. I knew a man who ruined a close friendship because he decided, without evidence, that his friend had lost respect for him. Every conversation was dissected afterward, every pause interpreted as judgment. He never asked. He never clarified. He simply pulled away, protecting himself from an offense that existed only in his own projection. Intelligent people learn to treat this impulse like any other uninvited thought. Notice it, name it, and let it pass. They ask a simple but disarming question before reacting. Do I have evidence, or am I guessing? If the answer is guessing, they pause. They recognize that the other person's mind is their private territory, and trespassing without permission is not only futile, it's destructive. Practically, this means slowing down. It means letting silence be just silence, not a verdict. It means being comfortable enough in your own emotional landscape that you don't need to plant your fears in someone else's. Projection is, at its core, an energy drain disguised as vigilance. It's a belief-baiting narrative, a mental trick that pulls you into defending yourself against something that isn't even there. Intelligent people conserve that energy. They stay grounded in what is said, not in what is assumed. They ask for clarity when something matters, and when it doesn't, they release the need to be certain about what another person feels or thinks. This is not naivety, it's sovereignty. It's the understanding that your peace should not hinge on decoding someone else's unspoken thoughts. Sometimes the most respectful, most intelligent choice is to let people own their own minds while you own yours. Because when you stop playing detective in other people's stories, you gain the freedom to write your own without interference. The human mind loves simplicity. It loves to sort the world into neat, opposing boxes, right or wrong, friend or enemy, success or failure. This is binary thinking, a mental shortcut that saves time, but at the cost of depth. It feels decisive, even virtuous. After all, isn't it better to know where you stand? But in reality, this habit flattens complexity into caricature. Life is rarely black and white. Most of it lives in the gray. Binary thinking appeals to our desire for control. When something is labeled as entirely good or entirely bad, we feel a sense of certainty. But that certainty is brittle. The moment reality introduces nuance, the whole structure collapses. In relationships, binary thinking can turn a disagreement into a betrayal. In work, it can turn a single mistake into proof of incompetence. In self-reflection, it can turn one flaw into an identity. The Stoics cautioned against this kind of rigidity. Marcus Aurelius wrote of the importance of seeing things as they are, not as our prejudices define them. Seeing as they are means allowing complexity to exist without rushing to flatten it. I remember a leader who dismissed any suggestion that challenged him as disloyalty. To him, you were either on his side or against him. That worldview gave him quick judgments, but it also left him isolated. The truth is, most disagreements contain elements of both truth and misunderstanding. Most people are capable of both kindness and selfishness. Most situations carry both risk and opportunity. Intelligent people learn to resist the urge to label too soon. They hold space for multiple perspectives. They practice what I call the two alternatives rule. Before forming a conclusion, they deliberately list at least two other explanations. This simple act forces the mind to widen its lens. Binary thinking is a form of mental presence distortion field. It makes you believe you see the whole picture when you've only framed a corner of it. It turns your decisions into reflexes instead of responses. But intelligence thrives in nuance. It recognizes that certainty can be a comfort, but truth often lives in complexity. So the next time your mind shouts for a quick label, pause. Ask yourself what you might be missing, because wisdom doesn't come from picking the simplest side. It comes from standing in the space where both sides can be seen, weighed, and understood. That space is where better choices are born. There is a subtle but dangerous habit the mind often falls into, believing that because you feel something, it must be true. You feel anxious, so there must be danger. You feel guilty, so you must have done something wrong. You feel unappreciated, so others must not value you. This is emotional reasoning, letting your current emotional state stand as unquestioned evidence of reality. It's tempting because emotions are immediate and convincing. They flood the body, hijack breathing, and narrow your focus until the feeling becomes the only lens through which you see the world. But here's the truth. Emotions are signals, not verdicts. They are messengers carrying information, not judges passing final sentence. The Stoics understood this distinction. Epictetus taught that it is not events themselves that disturb us, but the opinions we form about them. Emotions are part of those opinions. They color them, distort them, sometimes amplify them beyond recognition. Imagine walking into a dimly lit room and seeing a coiled shape in the corner. Your body reacts, heart pounding, muscles tense, because you believe it's a snake. When you turn on the light and see it's just a rope, the feeling dissolves. The emotion was real, but the belief behind it was false. Emotional reasoning is like refusing to turn on the light. I once worked with someone who interpreted any lack of immediate feedback from their boss as proof they had failed. A delayed email response meant disappointment. A short meeting meant mistrust. In reality, their boss was juggling a dozen priorities, none of which had anything to do with them. But their feelings, left unexamined, had already decided the story. Intelligent people learn to place a pause between feeling and conclusion. They use language to create that distance. Instead of, "I am unsafe," they say, "I feel unsafe." Instead of, "They don't respect me," they say, "I feel disrespected." That tiny shift changes everything. It acknowledges the reality of the feeling without surrendering to it as fact. This is emotional sovereignty, the ability to own your emotions without letting them own you. Psychologically, emotional reasoning is a form of cognitive leak trap. It drains mental clarity by forcing you to defend feelings as if they were truths. It turns every conversation into a potential threat, every quiet moment into a suspicion, every decision into a hostage negotiation with your own mood. The Stoic response is not to suppress feelings, but to interrogate them. Ask, what evidence supports this feeling? What evidence contradicts it? Is the intensity of this emotion proportional to the facts? Often you'll find the emotional volume turned up higher than the situation warrants. This awareness doesn't erase the feeling, but it frees you from obeying it blindly. Intelligent people know that feelings can be valid without being accurate. They can point to something worth exploring without dictating the entire narrative. They practice moving through emotions like walking through weather, acknowledging the rain without declaring that it will never stop. Over time, this habit rewires the relationship between thought and feeling. You stop being unreadable in the way that hides your truth, and start being unreadable in the way that protects your clarity. And when others can't predict your reactions based solely on your feelings, they can't manipulate you through them. Because in the end, emotional reasoning isn't just about mistaking feelings for facts. It's about giving away your power to whatever mood arrives uninvited. The intelligent alternative is simple but rare. Feel fully, think clearly, and let truth, not just emotion, decide what you believe. There is a quiet but profound shift that happens when you stop seeing your thoughts as passing events and start seeing them as who you are. A single idea. I'm bad at relationships. I always mess things up. I'm just not the kind of person who can change. Becomes more than a passing observation. It becomes a label. And labels, once worn long enough, begin to feel like skin. This is identity fusion with thoughts, the merging of what you think with who you believe yourself to be. The danger lies in how seamless it feels. You don't notice the moment it happens. One day you're thinking, "I failed at this task." The next you're telling yourself, "I'm a failure." The thought has fused with your identity, and every new experience gets filtered through it. Psychologically, this is a form of narrative override injection. The original event might have been small, but once the story attaches to your sense of self, it rewrites every chapter that follows. You begin to defend the thought as if defending your own existence. The Stoics understood this trap. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." He meant that repeated thinking stains the character, tinting perception until it feels permanent. But thoughts are not tattoos. They are weather patterns. They pass, change, dissolve. It is we who decide whether to hold them still long enough to etch them into our identity. I knew a woman who once failed a public presentation early in her career. Instead of seeing it as a single bad day, she carried it forward as proof she was terrible at public speaking. She avoided opportunities, turned down promotions, and lived within the boundaries of a thought that was never entirely true. Intelligent people learn to create distance between themselves and their mental content. They use language deliberately. Instead of saying, "I am anxious," they say, "I am experiencing anxiety." Instead of, "I am not creative," they say, "I haven't yet practiced creativity enough." These small adjustments act as mental fault lines. They break the fusion between thought and identity. This separation is not denial, it is clarity. It allows you to hold a thought in your hand, turn it over, and examine it without confusing it for your reflection. Without this separation, every challenge to the thought feels like a challenge to the self. You defend it even when it harms you, because letting it go feels like erasing yourself. But here's the truth. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who notices them. That awareness is your sovereignty. It's the guard at the gate of your mind who decides which visitors stay and which are shown out. Psychologically, this awareness stops cognitive leak traps. When you don't fuse identity with passing thoughts, you prevent your energy from being drained into defending old scripts. You keep your mental landscape flexible enough to grow. Intelligent people practice this daily. They catch themselves using identity-heavy language and replace it with more fluid expressions. They remind themselves that who they are is constantly evolving, and that a single thought, no matter how loud, does not have the authority to define them without permission. Over time, this becomes a habit of quiet resilience. You stop reacting to every thought as a command. You start treating them like weather reports, some accurate, some exaggerated, none permanent. And when you can see a thought as simply a thought, you gain the freedom to decide what kind of person you want to be, instead of letting yesterday's narrative decide for you. That is not detachment. It's the deepest form of presence. There's a stage in the mind where performances happen daily, though no audience is invited. On this stage, you compare your life to others, sometimes to inspire yourself, but often to measure your worth. It's the theater of comparison, and in this theater, the lighting is always rigged, the script is always biased, and the outcome is predetermined. You lose. The mind selects highlight reels of other people's lives and plays them alongside your behind-the-scenes footage. You see their polished successes, but not the messy rehearsals. You see their applause, but not the empty seats they once faced. Social media has turned this theater into a 24-hour cinema, feeding you a constant stream of curated lives. Every scroll can feel like another reminder that you're not there yet, not enough yet, not shining in the same way. Psychologically, this is powered by availability bias, the human tendency to overestimate the significance of information that's most readily available. You know your own struggles in intimate detail, but you know theirs only through filtered glimpses. And still, the comparisons feel real. The Stoics warned about this long before Instagram existed. Seneca wrote, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality." Comparison is suffering in imagination. It builds a world where you're always one step behind someone else's pace. I once knew a young artist who nearly quit painting altogether because she compared her work to a peer who seemed endlessly innovative. What she didn't know was that the peer had been refining their skills for a decade longer and had endured countless rejections. But the comparison theater never shows the full timeline. It cuts straight to the standing ovation. Intelligent people know that comparison, when misused, is a cognitive presence distortion. It shifts your focus from your own path to someone else's, leaving you chasing shadows instead of building substance. The antidote isn't to avoid all comparison, but to choose the script. They compare themselves to their past self, to who they were a year ago, a month ago, even a day ago. This is progress-based comparison, and it turns the theater into a classroom. Practically, this means curating your mental feed as deliberately as your social media feed. If someone's life triggers envy rather than inspiration, mute it. If someone's story stirs self-doubt rather than motivation, question why you're keeping that front row seat in your mental theater. You have control over which performances play in your mind. The Stoic approach is to focus on what is within your control, your actions, your growth, your virtues, and release what isn't, the paths, luck, and timing of others. When you withdraw energy from the comparison theater, you get it back to invest in your own work. You reclaim hours that would have been spent in silent self-criticism and turn them into hours of creation, learning, and living. Over time, the stage in your mind becomes quieter. The applause you care about comes not from imagined audiences, but from your own inner witness, the part of you that knows whether you've acted with integrity, effort, and courage today. And when that witness nods in approval, you realize the comparison theater was never worth the ticket price, because the worth of your life isn't measured in someone else's spotlight. It's built in the light you create for yourself. There is a hidden algorithm in your mind, one that works much like the feed on your favorite social media platform. It notices what you pay attention to, and then it serves you more of the same. This is the confirmation feed, the mental habit of only noticing, seeking, and remembering information that supports what you already believe. If you think the world is dangerous, you'll spot every headline about crime. If you believe people can't be trusted, you'll remember every betrayal but forget every act of kindness. Over time, this feed shapes your perception of reality until it feels airtight, self-proving, impossible to question. Psychologists call this confirmation bias, and it is one of the most insidious mental traps because it doesn't just distort what you see, it determines what you don't see. You're not merely interpreting reality incorrectly, you're curating reality itself. The Stoics would call this a form of mental slavery. Epictetus warned, "It is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." The confirmation feed pre-decides your reaction by filtering the events you even notice. It narrows your field of vision until your mind is living in an echo chamber of its own making. I knew a man convinced his colleagues were conspiring to undermine him. Every late reply, every whispered conversation, every unreturned smile became evidence in his mental case file. What he never noticed were the moments when those same colleagues defended him in meetings or covered for him when deadlines were tight. His feed didn't allow those events in. The problem with the confirmation feed is that it feels comfortable. It reassures you that you're right, and being right feels safe. But comfort is not the same as clarity. Intelligent people understand that the mind's algorithm needs manual intervention. They deliberately seek out disconfirming evidence. They read perspectives they disagree with, ask questions to test their own assumptions, and, most importantly, pause before accepting their first interpretation of an event as truth. Practically, this might mean challenging yourself to find at least one fact or observation that contradicts your current belief before making a judgment. If you think a friend is angry with you, look for evidence they are not. If you believe a project will fail, find reasons it might succeed. This doesn't mean abandoning your beliefs. It means making sure they're built on more than selective data. The Stoic practice of examining impressions is a direct antidote to the confirmation feed. When a thought arises, ask, "Is this impression complete? What am I not seeing?" What might someone else notice here that I have overlooked? This mental discipline keeps your worldview from becoming brittle and self-reinforcing. Over time, breaking free from the confirmation feed makes you more adaptable, more open, and less likely to be blindsided by reality. You start to see the whole field, not just the plays that support your team's score. And in a world where information is abundant, but truth is selective, that awareness becomes a form of quiet power. The intelligent mind is not one that always holds the right beliefs. It's one that is willing to update them when reality demands it. Because the goal is not to win every argument with yourself or others, it's to keep your mental lens clean enough to see the world as it is, not just as you expect it to be. Long before you learn to speak in your own voice, you inherit stories from others. Some come from family, about what kind of person you are, what you're capable of, and what kind of life you should want. Others come from culture, religion, peers, even casual remarks from strangers that lodge in your mind like splinters. These are unchosen narratives, scripts you never auditioned for, yet somehow you're living out the role. The danger is not just that these stories can be false, it's that they can be limiting even when they sound benign. In our family, we don't take risks. People like us don't do things like that. You're the responsible one. You can't afford to fail. Once internalized, these lines shape decisions, relationships, and self-image, all without conscious permission. Psychologists describe this as introjection, the unconscious adoption of others' beliefs and expectations. The Stoics understood how corrosive this could be. Marcus Aurelius urged, "Stop letting your mind be a slave, to be jerked about by selfish impulses, to be dissatisfied with your present lot, and to mistrust the future." The most subtle slavery is to live inside a story you didn't write. I once worked with a man who spent 20 years in a career he hated because his father once told him, "Real men provide stability." The story was so deeply woven into his sense of duty that leaving the job felt like betraying his identity. But it wasn't his identity, it was his inheritance. Intelligent people learn to audit their internal library. They pull books off the shelf and ask, "Who wrote this? Do I still want to live by it?" This is not rebellion for rebellion's sake. It's authorship. It's the difference between being an actor in someone else's play and becoming the playwright of your own. Practically, this process starts with awareness. The next time you feel resistance to a choice, starting a business, moving to a new city, ending a relationship, ask yourself, is this hesitation coming from me or from a story I was handed? Then test it. Imagine making the choice as if the old narrative didn't exist. How does it feel? If it feels liberating, that's a sign the story was a cage, not a compass. The Stoic discipline of self-examination can dismantle unchosen narratives piece by piece. By tracing the origin of a belief, you strip it of its unearned authority. You realize that many of the truths guiding your life were never tested against reality. They were just passed down like family heirlooms, whether or not they fit. Breaking free doesn't always mean rejecting the narrative outright. Sometimes it means rewriting it in a way that serves your values today. You might keep the family story about valuing stability, but redefine stability as the resilience to adapt, rather than the refusal to change. Over time, this authorship transforms your relationship to the past. You no longer see yourself as the product of every story you've been told. You see yourself as the editor, keeping what's useful, cutting what's not, and adding chapters no one expected. And in that act, you reclaim something priceless, the right to decide who you are and what your life is for. Because the most intelligent mind is not the one that remembers every story. It's the one that chooses which ones are worth living. Your mind is like a reservoir. Every thought, observation, and insight you collect is water stored for the moments you need clarity, judgment, or creativity. But in many minds, there are small cracks, cognitive leaks, that drain away focus and energy without you noticing. These leaks show up as distractions disguised as urgency, pointless mental rehearsals of conversations that never happen, or the constant toggling between tasks that leaves nothing finished. They are traps because they don't feel like danger. They feel like activity. Yet in truth, they are erosion, quietly wearing down the depth of your attention until what once felt like a deep lake becomes a shallow puddle. Psychologists call this attention residue, the lingering fragments of one task bleeding into the next, leaving your mind partially occupied and never fully present. The Stoics might describe it as scattering your soul. Seneca warned, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere." When your mind is leaking through too many open tabs, mental and digital, you're nowhere fully, not even in your own life. I once knew a highly capable manager whose calendar was packed from dawn to night. She prided herself on multitasking mastery, but when we examined her actual output, half of her week was spent revisiting decisions she'd already made, rereading emails she'd already answered, and worrying about things outside her control. The leaks weren't in her ability, they were in her attention management. Intelligent people recognize that plugging cognitive leaks is not just about productivity, it's about mental sovereignty. They treat focus as a finite resource, guarding it the way a Stoic guards their peace. This begins with identifying the leaks. Which recurring thoughts add no value? Which urgent inputs pull you off course most often? Which conversations replay in your head long after they should have ended? Once identified, the discipline is to close the loop. Write the email and send it. Decide and move on. End the mental rehearsal. Reduce the number of simultaneous commitments so your mind can give full presence to the ones that matter. The Stoic practice of directing attention to what is within your control is the ultimate sealant for cognitive leaks. If a thought has no action attached and no bearing on your values, it's a leak. Let it drain away, but stop trying to carry it. Over time, sealing these traps changes the quality of your mind. Focus becomes deeper. Rest becomes real, not just the absence of work. And when challenges arise, your mental reservoir is full enough to respond with clarity instead of scrambling from depletion. In a world engineered to monetize your attention, choosing where to place it is an act of quiet rebellion. The intelligent mind is not the one that never gets distracted, it's the one that notices the leaks early and repairs them before the waterline drops. Because your thoughts are your most valuable currency, and leaking them on what doesn't matter is the fastest way to go bankrupt in the only economy that counts, the economy of your inner life. If you followed this journey through the 10 mental traps intelligent people avoid, you've probably recognized patterns in your own thinking. Places where the mind loops back on old hurts, forecasts, storms that never arrive, or quietly accepts scripts written by other people. That recognition is not a sign of weakness. It's the first proof of strength. The Stoics believe that awareness is the gateway to freedom. You cannot guard what you cannot see. Each of these traps, whether it's the echo chamber of a confirmation feed or the slow drain of cognitive leaks, has one thing in common. They all steal your ability to live deliberately. They turn the mind from a disciplined instrument into a reactive machine, bouncing from one impression to another without ever asking, "Is this worth my attention?" Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." But quality is not an accident. It's the result of constant tending, like a gardener removing weeds before they take root. Avoiding these traps is not about becoming cold or detached. It's about staying awake. It's about reclaiming mental real estate so that your thoughts serve your values, not the other way around. In a world where noise is relentless and distraction is profitable, guarding your mind is a radical act. The intelligent person understands that the mind will be shaped by culture, by algorithms, by the loudest voices in the room, unless they step in as the curator. That means questioning impressions before swallowing them, pausing when emotions rise, and seeking clarity even when certainty feels more comfortable. And it means accepting that this is not a one-time project, but a lifelong practice. You will notice these traps again. You will sometimes fall into them. But each time you catch yourself and choose differently, you strengthen the muscle of mental sovereignty. You start to move through life with less reactivity and more intention, less clutter and more clarity. The ultimate reward is not just sharper thinking, it's a deeper peace. You realize that the state of your mind is not determined by what happens to you, but by what you allow to stay inside it. And when your inner world is disciplined, the outer world can rage, and you will still move through it with the calm certainty of someone who knows they are in command of the only territory they can truly own. If this video has made you pause and reflect on your own mental habits, don't let that moment pass. Awareness without action fades quickly. Choose one trap you've recognized today, just one, and commit to dismantling it this week. Write it down. Watch for it in your thoughts. And each time you notice it, practice the Stoic discipline of stepping back and asking, is this within my control? Is this serving my values? You'll be surprised how quickly a single shift can ripple through the rest of your life. I'd love to hear which of these 10 traps spoke to you most, or which one you've already worked to overcome. Share your thoughts in the comments, not just for me, but for others here who might need your perspective. Our community thrives on shared wisdom, and your insight might be the exact line someone else needs to hear today. And if you found value in this, there's more to explore. We've built a library of videos on Stoic principles applied to modern challenges. From guarding your peace in chaos, to mastering emotional discipline, to seeing through the illusions of modern life. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episode, where we'll dive even deeper into the mental skills that turn quiet reflection into unshakable strength. Because intelligence is not just what you know, it's how you choose to think. And the mind you build today is the life you will live tomorrow.